The first thing I noticed was the footprints. They were fresh, pressed into the snow beneath the wooden awning outside our cabin, leading directly toward our front door. The strange part wasn't that someone had been there. It was where those footprints went next. They turned away from the cabin. At the time, I didn't know that those tracks would be the beginning of the most unsettling night my wife and I had ever experienced. My name is Ethan, and I'm a photographer. Last year, my wife and I took a trip into the Colorado mountains for an art project I was working on. She was also an avid skier, so naturally, she convinced me that the trip needed to include some time on the slopes. We had two choices for where to stay. We could book a room at one of the ski resorts, or we could rent a private log cabin. The cabin won immediately. It sounded more romantic, it was cheaper, and the thought of being tucked away in a warm wooden cabin while a blizzard raged outside seemed almost perfect. The cabin itself wasn't luxurious. It was small, single-story, and divided into 4 basic rooms: a bedroom with space for 2, a little living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. But that was exactly what I wanted. That evening, the storm had grown strong enough to interfere with the cable signal, leaving us with very little to do. Outside, darkness was beginning to settle over the mountains, but there was still enough natural light for me to take some photographs and video of the snowfall. I grabbed my camera. "I'll be back in 10 minutes, I told my wife. I pulled on my boots and coat, opened the door, and stepped outside. The cold hit immediately. Snow was blowing beneath the wooden awning, collecting in uneven patches around the entrance. I was about to walk away when something caught my eye. Footprints. They had been left in the fresh snow. I stared at them for several seconds. They began near the front of the cabin and continued outward, as though someone had approached the door, stood there for a while, and then turned around. I followed the direction of the tracks, and that was when I realized they weren't going away from the cabin. They were circling it. I should have gone straight back inside. Instead, curiosity won. I followed the footprints toward the right side of the cabin, each step sinking into the fresh snow. The wind pushed loose flakes across the ground, but the tracks were still clearly visible. Then I saw where they led. The bedroom window. My heart seemed to stop. I looked through the glass. My wife was sitting on the bed, completely unaware of what was happening outside. She was focused on her iPad, her face illuminated faintly by the screen. She looked up. She saw me. I raised my hand and waved. For a moment, everything seemed normal, but it wasn't. Someone had been standing outside our bedroom window. I kept following the tracks. They continued around the cabin, disappearing briefly beneath patches of blowing snow before appearing again. I reached the other side. There was another set of tracks leading directly to the living room window. I stopped. Whoever had made them hadn't simply walked past our cabin. They had gone to our bedroom window. Then they had gone to the living room window. Someone had been moving around our cabin while we were inside. The question that kept running through my mind was simple. How long had they been there? I stood in the snow for nearly a minute, staring at the tracks and trying to decide what to do. Every sensible part of me was telling me to go back inside, lock the door, and call someone. But another part of me needed to know where the footprints ended. Eventually, I followed them. The tracks now led away from the cabin and toward the trees. That detail made everything worse. I knew I wasn't following someone who had simply arrived at the cabin. I was following someone who had been at our windows and then walked away. The footprints continued into the trees. I followed them until the cabin was partially hidden behind the snowfall. Then I saw him. A man stood several yards ahead. He wore a black coat, and his back was turned toward me. He was facing a tree, slouched slightly forward, staring at the ground. He wasn't moving. Snow had already begun accumulating on his hood and shoulders. He looked as though he had been standing there for a long time. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe normally. If he had looked injured, lost, or frightened, I probably would have called out to him. But he wasn't doing anything. He was simply standing there, watching the ground. I slowly began backing away. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to make a sound. And more than anything, I didn't want him to turn around and see me. When I finally reached a safe distance, I turned and hurried through the snow toward the cabin. By the time I reached the cabin, my breathing was heavy. I opened the door, rushed inside, and slammed it shut behind me. My wife immediately came over. What happened? She looked at me, then at the door, and then back at me. I must have looked as frightened as I felt. For several minutes, she kept asking what was wrong. Eventually, I told her. I explained about the footprints. I told her they had led to both our windows. Then I told her about the man standing in the trees. Her reaction was immediate. She started packing. "We're leaving," she said. "Right now." I told her no. The cabin had already been paid for, and leaving early meant we wouldn't get our money back. As uncomfortable as the situation was, I convinced myself that we couldn't simply abandon the trip because some strange man had been walking around outside. She didn't agree. She locked both locks on the front door. Then she checked every window. One by one, she made sure they were completely sealed. For the rest of the evening, we stayed inside. We read things on our iPads. I went through the photographs and videos I had taken earlier. Neither of us said much about the man, but neither of us had forgotten him. Eventually, we turned off the lights. The cabin became almost completely dark. Outside, the storm continued. Wind moved through the trees, and small flakes of snow tapped softly against the windows. The sound was strangely calming. I remember thinking that maybe my wife had simply been scared by what I saw. Maybe the man had left. Maybe I had let the isolation and the storm get into my head. Then my wife spoke. "What if he's still out there?" I tried to reassure her. "There's no way he's still out there." I believed it when I said it. Or at least, I wanted to. The wind continued blowing. Snow whispered against the glass. We were both still awake, listening to the storm. Then came the sound that changed everything. A knock. Not on the front door. On the bedroom window. We both went completely still. There was no mistaking it. That wasn't the wind. That wasn't a branch. Someone had knocked on our bedroom window. I got out of bed immediately. I didn't turn on the lights. I motioned for my wife to follow me into the living room. Neither of us had anything we could use as a weapon. There was no time to search for something. If the person outside had been watching our cabin, then they already knew where we were. And now they were standing at our window. I whispered to my wife that we had to leave. Forget the luggage. Forget everything inside the cabin. We were going to make a run for the Jeep. We slipped on our boots and coats in the darkness, moving as quietly and quickly as we could. Every second felt stretched out. The cabin was silent except for the wind. Then another knock came. This time it came from the living room window, the opposite side of the cabin, the same side facing the Jeep. We looked at each other. That was our opening. I reached for the door. We moved outside. The cold struck us instantly, but neither of us stopped. Snow crunched beneath our boots as we hurried toward the Jeep. I pulled out the keys and pressed the unlock button. At that moment, I was unbelievably grateful that I'd chosen a Wrangler with remote locks. The doors unlocked. We climbed inside. I started the engine. For a second, nothing happened except the sound of the vehicle coming to life. Then the headlights came on, and there he was, the man. He was standing near the cabin, not at one of the windows, not beside the door. He was facing the log cabin wall. His body was positioned almost exactly the way I had seen him earlier in the trees. His face wasn't visible. It looked as though he was deliberately hiding it. I stared at him through the windshield. He didn't move. He didn't turn toward us. He simply stood there, facing the wall of the cabin. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Then I put the Jeep into gear. We drove. The snow and weather made the journey tense, but the Wrangler handled the road without much trouble. We headed toward the nearby ski resort, leaving the cabin behind us. Neither of us wanted to look back. We spent the night at the resort. It wasn't until the next day that we felt comfortable enough to return to the cabin. We still had our belongings inside. We had left everything behind when we ran. The daylight made the place feel different. Smaller, less threatening. We opened the door. Nothing appeared disturbed. Our things were still there. The cabin was empty. We checked around the property. The man was gone. There was no sign of him. No explanation for why he had been there. And no answer to the question that bothered me most. Why had he been standing outside our windows in the first place? We never found out. Even after we collected our belongings, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had left something behind. Not an object. An explanation. We had returned to the cabin in daylight, when the mountains looked completely different from the night before. The storm had passed, and the surroundings were quiet. The same trees where I had first seen the man stood along the edge of the property. The snow covered most of the tracks from the previous night. Whatever footprints remained were broken apart by the weather. The man himself was nowhere to be found. There was no confrontation, no final appearance, no explanation, just an empty cabin. That was what made the experience so difficult to process. If the man had tried to break into the cabin, there would have been something we could point to. If he had shouted through the windows, we would have known what he wanted. If he had simply been lost, there might have been some reasonable explanation for why he was in the woods. But none of those things happened. He had walked around our cabin. He had gone to the bedroom window, then the living room window. Then he had disappeared into the trees. I had followed his footprints and found him standing motionless beside a tree, facing downward. Hours later, after we had locked ourselves inside, someone knocked on the bedroom window, then the living room window. And when we finally ran for the Jeep, the same man was standing beside the cabin, facing the wall. He didn't chase us. He didn't try to stop us. He didn't even appear to acknowledge that we were there. He simply stood in the same strange position. I still think about that night. As a photographer, I'm used to looking closely at things people might overlook. Small details, shadows, reflections, footprints, things that don't seem important until you realize they are. That night, the footprints were the only warning we got. If I had ignored them, we might have stayed inside without ever realizing someone had been watching us. Maybe the man had no intention of hurting us. Maybe he was lost. Maybe there was an explanation that would make the entire night seem ordinary. But I don't know, and neither does my wife. What I do know is that when we left that cabin in the middle of a Colorado blizzard, we weren't running because we had seen something impossible. We were running because a real person had been outside our windows.